Stop the FOMO OLED TV buyers. Today in this video, we're going to go through the 5 mistakes to avoid when shopping for an OLED TV, whether you're a first-time buyer or this is your second OLED. Yes, this is the year that OLED technology is taking over the TV space. It is the most popular premium technology right now, but this year is also the year that introduces new technology to OLED. And the question for you, first-time OLED buyer or veteran OLED buyer, is which OLED TV to get? So many options, different brands, different technologies now. And what size is it for you? And brightness, how bright should you get? Are you overpaying for features that you don't need? How much to pay just for the image quality you need? But first, let me introduce today's sponsor, whokeys. Yep, you just finished your big old PC Windows build. You have the best of the best, and sadly, you have less than $20 to your name. whokeys to the rescue. Use my code SF20 and immediate discount. Let's quickly go through the activation process after you've purchased Windows 10 on whokeys. Go to your whokeys account and select My Purchased Orders. See your order. To the far right, click on the button that says View Keys Codes to see the Windows CD code. At the bottom of this order where it says Code Card, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from whokeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can download the Windows 10 Pro key and you're up and running. But that's not all, folks. whokeys has keys for games too. Steam, Origin, Uplay, you name it, you got it. Check out their sites. There are discounts for all sorts of stuff. And most importantly, you want to be productive? What about Office Suite? Yep, you can download a copy of Office Professional with my code SF20 at checkout, and bam. So years ago, 8-9 years ago, when OLED TVs were first introduced into the marketplace, it was prohibitively expensive. No more. Today, OLED TVs have dropped to a point where, frankly, the common consumer could get a 55-inch OLED TV for $1,000 or less. The question is then, okay, you're ready to dip your toe into OLED TVs, or maybe you're upgrading from a 4-year-old OLED. What should you consider today? Because a lot has changed. And the most important thing that's changed is, we'll go to mistake number 1, or rather an urban myth that you might have to reconsider. Burn-in is not a problem for 99% of users. So we'll get into the 99% use case, and then the 1% that may be skeptical and you may have to look at it twice. But we'll start with the 99%, which is most likely you, especially the first-time OLED TV buyer. OLED TVs today, unlike maybe 5-6 years ago where burn-in was an issue, you've seen a lot of burn-in videos. These were OLEDs that were produced in 2017 and before, maybe even 2018. But since 2019, LG Display, LG Electronics, Sony, and many of the TV makers out there who are selling these OLED TVs, they've found ways to minimize that burn-in risk to a point where 99% of the use cases, you're okay. So let's talk about, well, what use case is that? If you are mostly streaming, watching movies, occasionally watching sports, just a mixture of everything, don't worry about it. That's the 99% case. Essentially, if you are a normal TV viewer, a little bit of gaming, casual gaming, a couple hours a day, a couple hours of movies, a couple hours of sports, that's fine. That's like over 6 hours of TV watching a day. The burn-in issue is not going to affect you, because what LG Display and its TV maker partners have done is found ways to dim certain logos, pixel shift a little bit. The brightness isn't too bright. They found a way to control at the pixel level the OLED burn-in issue. So for those of you who have a mixture of content watching uses, it's okay. Don't worry about burn-in. Now, let's talk about the 1%, PC monitor use. Okay, these are TVs. But if you're using the OLED TV as a monitor, a computer monitor, remember that it wasn't designed specifically for that use case. There are OLED monitors specific to that use. But let's say you want to use a 42-inch, 49-inch, maybe even a 55-inch OLED TV as a monitor, right? Just a larger monitor, nice and big, 4K screen. The brightness, the static images, these are the critical points that may, I'm not saying always, that may result in image retention, where even though you may change the screen image or turn off the screen to a different dark blank color, whatever, you're going to see a bits of that image from the previous screen. You're like, oh my gosh, it got burned in. Not necessarily so. Try a pixel refresh. Normally, that image retention goes away, but if you keep on doing it, the same image in the same space, day after day after day, because you know what your computer desktop looks like, right? You got the same logos just out there, and you have it in PC mode, and you're the brightness pumped up, there is a risk. Those are the people that may have an issue. So be aware. If you're buying this to be a PC monitor, you're taking your chances. I suggest you get the LG G1 or G2 because it comes with a 5-year panel replacement warranty, which also includes burn-in replacement, so keep that in mind. The second group, and this is kind of all over the place, it may or may not affect you depending on the kind of games you play. So gaming enthusiasts, hardcore gamers, right? You know who you are. Certain games are at slightly higher risk of burn-in than other games. I'm not going to say which ones because these games change, they get firmware updates, the TVs get firmware updates to address gaming, but it is there. Your risk is slightly higher than the normal person just because you're playing the same games hour on end. In the past, it's been games like FIFA, right, where you have the bright scoreboard. Now, if FIFA changes and makes the scoreboard either transparent or dimmable, that might help a lot. And if the TVs address those games specifically and dim the entire game, great, right? But that's something to keep in mind because some people like to go into the service menu and override these safety measures. So, hey, what are you going to do, right? And lastly, you're using this OLED TV as a sports ticker, news ticker. It's the same channel, cable channel, whether it's CNN or ESPN or Fox Sports, whatever, and you have this bright ticker on the bottom that has the score, or you're watching MSNBC, you're watching Bloomberg, and you have the stock ticker on the bottom, right, just running back and forth, and you have this TV on 12 hours a day. Maybe you're putting up in a sports bar, so you're watching sports all day long. Maybe you're in the office and it's running for your office people to see stocks and news and whatever. That could be a risk because you have this static image. And so the question is, should you get an OLED? I don't think so. This takes us to mistake number 2. You buy an OLED, but you put it in an environment where your OLED doesn't shine. The second mistake is, I'm going to put my OLED in a super bright room. Well, now you really don't necessarily need an OLED, and this is why. First of all, let's talk about the strength of the OLED. What makes the OLED special? What makes people praise OLEDs, especially reviewers like myself and critical watchers and movie enthusiasts? They assume you're going to watch this OLED TV in the dark or a moderately lit, light-controlled room where there's no glare. The reason is this. In the dark or in a well-controlled, light-controlled room, the infinite contrast really pops. That means from the deepest blacks all the way up to the brightest brights, everything is there. You see it. It looks real. It looks three-dimensional. It looks immersive. These are the descriptions. But it is infinite contrast. It looks like it has a higher resolution. As a matter of fact, a 4K OLED with infinite contrast looks like it's a higher resolution than an 8K LCD TV that may be a little washed out because it does not have infinite contrast. It's that infinite contrast that makes the TV look even sharper than it should, right? Because 4K, 8K, shouldn't 8K look sharper? It's the infinite contrast. That's what comes first. But that's in a dark room, moderately lit room with light control. In a super bright room where you have a lot of ambient light noise and you have glare on the TV, you can see your windows in the background, the infinite contrast is almost pointless. Now that kind of neutralizes the infinite contrast to a certain degree, right? There's too much light noise. Your eyes now are shifting its sensitivity from darkroom sensitivity to bright room sensitivity, which reduces its sensitivity to contrast, which means, why do you need an OLED TV now? You have mistakenly bought the best technology and put it in a room where it doesn't shine. Shine, was that a pun? No. In a super bright room with lots of glare, two things are happening. We have the infinite contrast that now you're not going to notice as well. More importantly, OLEDs don't have the same level of anti-glare, anti-reflection coating as bright LCD TVs designed for a bright room. Because remember, these OLEDs, again, when they were designed, the designers, the TV makers, envisioned this to be a premium product in a light-controlled room. So their coating, their anti-glare coating, is not as aggressive, which means if you put it in a super bright room with lots of glare, it's going to lack the anti-glare coating to fight the glare, which means it's going to be even worse on the OLED TV than on an LCD TV that has an aggressive anti-glare screen designed to be put in the super bright room with lots of glare, floor-to-ceiling windows all around you, right? In such a case, something like this year's Sony X95K or the QN90B, 95B, 900B, these are super bright TVs, the TCL 8 series or the Hisense U8H, the 6 series. These TVs are super bright because the TV makers assume you are in a bright room, lights everywhere, you need to fight that glare, and less important is the qualities that make OLED so awesome. We're talking the infinite contrast, the perfect blacks, the deep blacks. Here instead, in the bright room, they're okay with a little bit of black crushing, a little bit of lost shadow detail. Why? Again, in a bright room, all shadow detail is crushed anyway. So think about that. You have this OLED with amazing shadow detail, right? But you only see that shadow detail in a dark room because now you notice the shadow, the dark scene gradients. You take the same scene, you put it in a bright room, and the entire scene looks black because your light's adjusting to this ambient light, and then suddenly the whole screen looks too dark. So the number 2 complaint is, oh, OLED's too dark. No, OLED's just trying to be accurate to the scene. Your room's too bright, so keep that in mind. Mistake number 3, you are focusing on the latest and greatest OLED technology at such a microscopic level that in real content, you're not going to notice the minute improvements of these features. For example, we're just going to take LG displays, suddenly it's EVO, and the next thing you know, it's EVO EX, and so forth and so forth. But essentially, the difference between pre-EVO, then EVO EX, right? So 2020, 2021, 2022. In most scenes, you're not going to notice the difference. If anything, pre-EVO EX, or even before that, 2019, may have been the brightest panels. Remember that as you go year to year, it's not always about picture quality. Sometimes the panel makers are introducing technologies to help them save money during production, to help them reduce thermal inefficiency so it produces less heat, maybe the longevity of the screen, right? It lasts a little bit longer. But the ultimate image quality, all 3 are the same due to infinite contrast. So let's talk about what should you focus on when you're buying your first OLED. You have a budget. The mistake people made is you're focusing on the features you don't notice and not the features that you do. So what is the number 1 feature that you will notice when buying an OLED TV? And this applies to both first-time buyers and veteran buyers. It's the size. Get the largest size OLED with the brightness that fits your use case. Brightness that fits your viewing condition and the brightest size for that brightness. So let's talk about the brightness first. There is really only, depending on the brand, we'll start with the easy one, Samsung. Samsung only has one OLED TV this year. It's the QD-OLED S95B. So it only has one brightness, right? There is no other model that's brighter or less bright. So when you get the Samsung S95B, the good news is this is one of the brightest OLED TVs you can buy today, bar none. So you already know, okay, well, I want the Samsung S95B because it's one of the brightest TVs out there. I'm going to use it in both a moderately lit room and a dark room. I'm going to enjoy the OLED infinite contrast and so forth. But it limits its sizes to 55 and 65 inch. So you would get a 65 inch if that's your budget. Today, the 65 inch S95B is approximately $2,100, possibly $2,000, maybe just under $2,000 by Black Friday, but let's say $2,100 right now. Great deal, by the way, for a flagship level image quality. But for $2,100, could you get a 77 inch OLED? Possibly, because you're watching in a dark room, maybe the LG A1 or A2, at a larger size is around 2100 at some point, Black Friday, the holidays. Now you're getting a larger screen, although the LG A1, A2 is not as bright as the S95B. If you're watching in a dark room, a man cave, you may not need that brightness. Again, we don't know how much brightness you need, but the size though of 77 inches, that's pretty impressive given that the immersion is better with size. So keep that in mind. Now obviously if you are watching in a moderately lit room, I'd go with the S95B 65 inch if you want the qualities of QD-OLED, which we'll go to next, OLED versus QD-OLED. But right now, when debating between what size to get, start with the brightness you need for your room first, because you never want to complain it's too dim. And the technologies that give you the brightest OLEDs right now are QD-OLED, so the Sony A95K, which is very expensive, $3,500 right now for the 65-inch, or the $2,100 65-inch S95B, or the G2. At 65 inches, it's still about $2,500. These are the brightest ones, and among this group, ultimately the S95B is the least expensive of the bright TV at 65 inches. Maybe that's you, or maybe you can save a little bit more and get the C1 or C2 this year. C1 or C2, 65 inches will be under $2,000 by Black Friday, right? $1,800, $1,700. You don't need the S95B brightness if you're watching in a man cave at a 65-inch size with the C2 at $1,800. The extra money, get yourself a sound bar. That audio will always be better than any of these TVs anyway. But these are the things that you have to consider. Start with, how much brightness do I need? And so let's break that down. How much brightness do you need? The C2 is great, dark room to a moderately lit room. But the HDR pop in the moderately lit room will be a little bit more poppy, a bit more vibrant with the G2, which has a heatsink and pushes it a touch brighter. A90J brightness is so similar to the C2. I would not choose the A90J over the C2 based on brightness alone. It'd be on other things, possibly motion, possibly you like Sony color, that XR creation, right? Live color. That's what's unique to the A90J. So go for that rather than, oh, I'm getting the A90J because it's brighter than the C2. Not noticeably brighter. The only TVs that are really noticeably brighter than the C2 would be the G2, S95B, and the Sony Master Series A95K. But these are that 65-inch size. Only the G2 goes larger. You could debate between the C2 or G2 77-inch, C2 or G2 83-inch, but that takes us to the big question. C2 83-inch or G2 77, I would go with the C2 83-inch if the prices are within a few $100s, because the 83-inch is pretty substantial. So that's how I would look at choosing based on features. Start with the brightness you need, then go with the size. Everything else is dependent on your use case. If you are a hardcore gamer, get the LG. You know they support gaming much better than any other brand. If you watch mostly streaming and movies, lots of cable, over the air, get the Sony because their upscaling and image scaling is amazing. And for movie watchers, I believe their Cinemotion and all the various motions related to movie watching is great. However, if you watch a lot of sports and action, either the S95B or the LG OLEDs are a touch better than the Sony. I think their fast action motion interpolation, a little bit of soap opera is done better than Sony. Yes, Sony has a few artifacts if you turn up the soap. I do not turn up the soap that high, if at all. I just have a touch of soap because I do not like stutter or judder. And with the Sony, that touch of soap eliminates the stutter and judder, but doesn't elevate it to soap opera level. But those of you who like to bring up the soap opera a little bit more, the Sony will show some artifacts. So you have to match the brand to your use case. For most people, the C2 and G2 would be a phenomenal choice for their first OLED TVs because it matches all their use case. A little bit of gaming, sports, movies, they do it all, and then you have two brightness, or even three, right? G2 is the brightest, C2 is a little bit less bright, B2 is a little bit less bright than that, and the A2 is the least bright, but then you can get larger and larger. So if you get the maximum brightness you need, then get the largest size you need, I think that will fit your use case best. Now let's go to mistake number 4. QD-OLED versus OLED. You're choosing a TV based on the rumors that the QD-OLED is so amazing, you have to get the QD-OLED. Or, oh, I don't like the QD-OLED because it's first generation, I need to get an OLED. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Do not base your decision to buy a TV based on whether it's QD-OLED or OLED. That's not the right decision. Understand the strengths and the flaws of each first, then go into your decision. So, back to the previous mistake, let's say brightness level, right? QD-OLED, pound for pound, will be brighter than an OLED without a heatsink. You add the heatsink, and the OLEDs with the heatsink are the G2 and the A90J, right? Sony A90J and the LG G2. Suddenly the brightnesses are very much equivalent, but the last thing that separates them visually, right? We're not talking about these minute differences where only a calibrator will notice, is DSE, the dirty screen effect, right? Banding, vertical banding, or dirty parts of the screen. It's just when you put it on a 15% gray pattern like this, you're going to see dirty screen. And OLED TVs from LG, from Sony, and Panasonic, and Philips, outside the US, right? They tend to have dirty screen effect issues. It's a panel lottery, some worse than others. LG 65-inch is the worst. And Sony, well, it is panel lottery. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But even when you win, let's say you have the best OLED TV, the wOLED technology from LG Display, with the least DSE, it's still no match for the QD-OLED, which up to this point, I have yet to hear anyone complain of DSE, and every reviewer and owner I know personally have marked, oh wow, this is an amazingly clean screen. And it could be because we're lucky. This is the first year Samsung Display wants to make an impression. They got rid of all the dirty screens and still get 85% yield. Hand clap to Samsung Display. I know how hard that is. But let's see what happens when you get to a 4 million production volume, right? But at this production volume of about 500,000 to date, their dirty screen effect issues, non-existent. So if you're sensitive to dirty screen and pink tint, magenta tint, also unique to the OLED experience, if you don't want that slight color shift when you go off angle, QD-OLED is the way to go. Okay, but now you know specifically why you're getting QD-OLED, right? You want that brightness, that a 65-inch size, and you don't want the heatsink of the G2 or the A90J. Sure, OLED S95B. You want clean screen. You don't want the issues of wOLED because you're getting a 65-inch, where an LG 65-inch OLED TV is more likely to have a dirty screen, or you have a dirty screen at 65-inch size and you want to get an OLED without any dirty screen, or you are sick of the pink tint on your wOLED, then yes, get the QD-OLED, because this year's QD-OLED in 2022, whether it's the S95B or the Sony A95K, no pink tint, and they will never have that pink tint. That's part of the differences between the two chemistry. And of course, dirty screen effect is not a problem this year. This is for 2022 models. 2023, 2024 remains to be seen. That's up to Samsung Display to continue its awesome QC when it comes to DSE. So OLED versus QD-OLED. I think for most users, we're going to assume you're not going to get the TVs calibrated, right? Let's throw calibration out the window because that's a whole other discussion. But for those of you who are just going to get the best TV you can out of the box without touching calibration services, QD-OLED for slightly brighter at the 65-inch size and the cleanest non-DSE affected screen, S95B or A95K this year. But if those two things are not something you care about, this is your first OLED, you could save some money and get yourself one of these wOLEDs, whether it's a Sony A80J, A80K, LG's A1, A2, B2, C2, G2, right? They have some qualities you like, but you don't know if you need QD-OLED. Well, get this TV first, save some money, get the largest size you can. And lastly, number 5, and this is something you guys cannot wait for me to talk about. Be wary of TV reviews, not because they might be wrong or they're hyping it up or they're shills. No, no, no. TV reviewers have their personal preferences. We all do. It's very subjective. When you watch any reviews on TVs and products, make sure their use case matches yours, because assume they're honest. I do. I'm honest. But you also have to understand what's their preferences. How do they watch their TV? Me. All of my reviews are done in the dark, unless I say, hey, we're going to try bright room watching, right? Short of that, they're always done in the dark. I do like my TVs to be calibrated. Now, sometimes they are uncalibrated to see what it looks like uncalibrated, but when I do a lot of head-to-head videos, I try to have them very similarly calibrated to reference, right? And that's how I watch my movies. And I do like my HDR peak brightness to be a little bit brighter. Sometimes it's not exactly accurate to source because we don't know what the source should be. No one knows, right? Because I don't have a reference monitor. So I like to max out my peak brightness. So if you watch my TV reviews, my emphasis is on first motion, stutter-free, jutter-free. I hate the stutter. I will live with a touch of soap opera, but I cannot live with stutter and jutter. So that's my motion preference. Number two, peak specular highlights. I need that pop, and OLED delivers that pop better than any other TV technology, including the brightest QLED, brightest LCD TVs. To date, I have yet to find any of those non-OLED TVs to have brighter specular highlights than a bright OLED S95B or QD-OLED S95B or OLED A90J. They win right there. I like shadow detail because I watch in the dark, so I get to notice all those infinite contrast details, great shadow detail. Those are the three things that are important to me. And is it important to you? If it is, my reviews will fit you. And I also prefer size over absolute technology, like QD-OLED, absolute technology, but it stops at 65 inches. So I would recommend many of you to get the 77-inch C2 over a 65-inch S95B. Let's say the prices are within a couple $100. You could still afford it. Add a little bit more money. You get a 77-inch C2. I'd go with that all day long because I think the immersion from the size more than makes up for the minor differences between a C2 and an S95B because they both share that number one feature, infinite contrast. In the dark, they're going to look so similar, but you get the larger TV size, right? So when it comes to TV reviewers, find the reviewer that matches your use case. I mean, some reviewers, they want just out of the box. They don't care about reference, accuracy. They just want out of the box. They go straight into gaming, and that's all they're going to talk about. Is that you? If it is, that's the reviewer for you. My belief is wisdom of the crowd. Watch as many reviewers as possible. Then you get a collective idea of first, what's your use case? You revisit what you watch the most. The one content that there's not enough reviews about, which I plan to change in the coming months, is sports watching. News, sports, where it's not about HDR. It's about, can this TV get bright enough in my room because I'm watching sports? I need to see the action. I don't want it to dim in the middle of the action. OLED is not good for that. So that's another use case where you're watching sports from across the room. You need that brightness. You don't care about the infinite contrast when you're watching sports. You just need it to get bright and you can see the score and the moving ball, whether it's soccer, football, golf, whatever, basketball. You want just the motion detail, motion resolution, and the scoreboard. Well, OLED may or may not be for you in that use case, and I probably recommend an LCD TV in that case, but regardless, at least you know that's your use case. Find reviewers that talk about that specific content, because if you watch reviews that only focus on either gaming or only focus on movie watching in a pitch dark room, fully calibrated, you may not have a good experience watching sports right in the middle of a day. So remember, match the TV reviews to your use case, and then you can make your decision. Hopefully this was helpful. And what am I missing? What mistake did you make that I did not mention? Let me know in the comment below. Until next time, stop the FOMO.